I had a younger man. I was doing a presentation over at Johnny Allen and the JK movement with those young people over there, and getting them involved in the whole radio thing about doing shows, because a lot of those young people say people don't listen to them. And I was letting them know we listen to you and we want to hear what you have to say. And I said, if you give me a piece on COVID, that I will read it on the radio. So I got one from a guy named Tajai. And he says, hello, my name is Tajai, and I will be sharing my experience with COVID-19. He says, the world has changed rapidly in many ways. Families have been affected by COVID-19. Parents have become teachers and lunchroom cooks. Although the food tastes better, we lack the classroom interaction. We need social engagement as children. We are confined to our homes more than ever. Mm-hmm. That social engagement piece that we talked about, I guess, and he's about maybe 13. He's about 13. And so that social engagement, maybe that's something that helps. I don't know if it's the interaction of peers and that sort of thing, but to hear him speak about that, maybe that applies to my son, and maybe it applies to some of the other young people as well. I'm going to throw it over to you and see what you think in terms of this social thing. Do you think that could be a detraction, or?
I definitely think it's going to have an impact on a lot of our children's development, and my concern is even with the younger children, right? That first grade, kindergarten, second grade level, where you're learning so much from your peers on a day-to-day basis when you're in normal school or in normal times, right? Now you're expected to do everything online, and you don't have that physical interaction with them. I'm concerned that their development is going to be impeded because of it. Mm-hmm. Seriously.
Yeah. I think so too. And for a young man to speak on that part of it too, a much younger man. So we know how serious the interaction of peers is with the teenagers and stuff. I mean, with the sneakers, the latest this, the showing off of their clothes and da-da-da-da.
And it also helps build their own personalities too, though, when they're interacting with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so too. So distance learning virtually, I mean, we always talked about, when we had the achievement gap, we talked about smaller class sizes. Remember? Back then we talked about smaller class sizes. Why then can't we do a smaller class size thing? But then I think that probably working in special ed, we would have up to maybe about 8 students. I was at a certain school that was like a lockup. Your kids moved with you from class to class. There was you could look through the windows or nothing like that. And so I was thinking about that model. If you got 6 kids, and then let's say we have to leave out of here and go to the science lab, we wait, to make sure that there's no one in the hall, and then we take the kids down to the science lab. So I think that the smaller class sizes can be a factor in, because even amongst 5 other peers, I think that a young person would feel a lot more comfortable. And I think that they'd learn better as well.
Yeah, and that decreases the chances of you spreading COVID-19 too, right? I mean, because you're in a smaller cohort, and as long as you all are all staying together, eating lunch together, going to gym together, in the classrooms together, essentially in a bubble, then there should be no spreading of any types of contagious viruses. And actually, a school in Tennessee, a school that my siblings attend, they're still doing that same type of model, right? They have smaller class sizes now, but they're still meeting in person every day. And if one person gets sick, the whole class has to stay at home in quarantine, right? If one person out of that bubble that they're in, they have I think it's like 8 to 10 students or whatever in each little bubble. If one person gets sick, the whole class has to go in quarantine. And I was talking to my sister a few days ago, and she's like, yeah, we still have gym. Because I'm like, well, how are you all doing gym? And she's like, we do have gym. There's like these little boxes or whatever that we like go inside, and we do our activities inside the box. And I'm like, what? My mind was just blown. Like, so I guess they have these big boxes, and they walk into the box and they do whatever the activity is, the exercise for gym. And then after, the person comes in and sanitizes all the boxes down, and they bring the next class size in.
I would think, I mean, when you're trying to think positive, I would think that it provides an opportunity for people, young people and or people, to spend a little bit more self-time, or it maybe increase some degree of self-awareness. Because when you're by yourself, you're just like, okay, this is me and I need this. I think in terms of studying, because also my son reported too that his grades wasn't too good this semester. And so,
and that's compared to other semesters.
Yeah.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think that he realized that, well, see, you were responsible for yourself. That assistance that you were getting, you probably depended on that assistance. And so what we took from that was that, so now that it's up to you to get what it is that you need. It's really up to you, and it always has been. You've just had some degree of assistance. And so now you have to substitute the assistance by putting forth more personal self-efforts in order to obtain what it is that you need out of these lessons. And I think for that part of it, it could be good, because some of us have that wait on mentality. Give me, you ain't doing, always looking for something outside. But when you start to turn those energies internal, I think that you can get better results. And so it takes some of us to be on the outside while this is happening to teach that. Maybe not necessarily be experts in the lesson that is being taught, but to teach them to go inside and give your best, because you're on your own. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, it's because of you. Then that empowering, I feel, could be impactful, and it could help, especially at a time like this. Because let's go back to when we weren't permitted to learn how to read.
Where we get information from. And that's what I was just going to touch on. I was going to say, now it's really teaching young kids how to be resourceful, right? And I'll talk about it all the time. We got the best thing in the world right here in the palm of our hand.
Yes.
I can get information at the speed of light almost. I can ask Siri anything, and she'll, boop, here's the statistic, here's the data, here's another link. I can go read the link, find out more information. Before, back in the day, prior to us having these devices, we had to go physically search that information up.
Encyclopedia. And then for the families who didn't have encyclopedias, we ended up getting a hand-me-down set of encyclopedias. Of course, there's always a volume or two missing when it's something that's given to you. Somebody just it's a volume or two missing.
You ain't gonna get the complete set.
Right. And maybe the people who had it before you, that set might have, coffee could have wasted on them, or, they might have been damaged. But nonetheless, you had a lot more. Let's say, for instance, if it was a 12 volume, you had 10 at least. So that's, you had more than what you had less of, So I used to, sometimes those were the only books in the house. Those were the only books in the house. And when I was a kid, there were some books that we couldn't bring home from school. We weren't able to bring books home. So we kept them in our desk at school. So those only books that I had to read was encyclopedias. And I'm grateful for that, because when I grew up and found out later on how Malcolm X had educated himself, he read the encyclopedias from aardvark all the way, from A to Z. When it made me feel kind of good, because we were
while
poor.
He was in prison.
Yeah, because we were poor. Books in the house. What for?
And also, I want to comment on a statement you made. You said you couldn't even take the books out of the desk when you're in school. You had to leave them there. I experienced that going to school. I was born in Chicago, lived there for half my life, and then moved here for the rest of the half. And we could never take our school books home. That was a class set.
No.
But when I got to White Bear Lake, you can take your books home. You had additional resources. And I think all of that contributes as well to a person's academic advancements and achievements. Just being able to have that book at home to use as a resource when you're going through homework or going through assignments, not just having it while you're in the classroom. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, of course it does. We only engaged and how the teacher, the book, like the Dick and Janes or whatever and everything. So why did Spot run away? And that's all we were, limited to thinking, why would Spot run away? Here it is. We didn't even have a pet. We couldn't afford no dog or nothing like that. None of us had that experience, so why would we know why Spot ran away? But the mindset was limited to those questions. And in that book of those maybe 4, 5 characters, you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was limited to that. And so you had to answer based upon, and that's was the structure of what you were being taught, as opposed to, I'm looking at kangaroo in the encyclopedia, a picture of the kangaroo, how it got its name. It was really just a roo. They call him Roo. And, those sort of things, in the encyclopedia. So I'm having more fun at home, reading. And then, of course, when I say we were poor, I know you hear people say we were so poor this, we were so poor that, we were so poor this. I'm going to just keep it real. We were so poor, all I had was imagination. Okay? But then again, I realized that I was really rich once I discovered my imagination and what it did for me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we had. We had imagination, period.
And it's just something about growing up in that environment. I think if you have that outlook and that perspective, I think it does make you a better person. Like I said before, I think it makes you someone who's resourceful, someone who can persevere, someone who's already experienced what being low is like, And I've had that similar plight. I know what it's like to struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's made me a much more ambitious and a person who can persevere more. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that, because here it is right now. Young people don't really have imagination because visually they're being manipulated. Things are being put into their minds. They don't have, raw imagination, that clean, pristine imagination that you place things into with your mind. They are now being shown everything to think. It's just they just see it and then they take it with them. They're not coming up with that internal, that stuff that to really imagine, because they're showing you everything.